Chaz, tell me a little bit about this painting and the women that were in it, that are in it, and how it came to be.
Well, this was the idea, of course, of C-SPAN for the upcoming program, which is now ongoing. Um, and the idea was to create some kind of an image that could be used for the program that would be emblematic of it and show course of history along with kind of continuity. So I say we, but C-SPAN decided on 4 figures, and they would be the first lady to the current first lady with a couple recognizable faces in between. The idea was well, first to have them placed tightly together as if they're standing together, which is tough to do in terms of reality, but it's an illustration, so you can. But then was to have the progression of the eyesight, so the progression of the view go from looking at you to progressing to the right. So that so you're going left to right, looking off into the future kind of concept. So it's not just a static image of 4 people looking at you. You have the first one looking, and then progressively they're looking farther and farther off to the right. And just coincidentally, there's some beautiful references of Michelle that came into play for that. And then same with I think it was Mrs. Kennedy in terms of ideal references. So that's how they kind of got placed.
And how old approximately do you think these women are, and why did you choose these versions of these women?
Oh yeah, well, from my perspective, that was fairly easy. So I was relying on what would be the public memory, so what we think of as the First Lady in the White House. And that can be easily traced through portraits, so their current portraits, the portraits that were done fairly soon after they were there. And then, of course, with Michelle Obama, that required just opening up the paper and looking at all the photographs for current. But they are, as they were, I think, best represented for their time in the White House.
How much research did you do on the 4 women featured in this painting before you began the work?
Well, in terms of history, I think I'm familiar with all of them, but visual references are what I require the most. So I went immediately to my collection of portraits and First Lady portraits and things like that. So I kind of saw what they would like to be seen and how properly publicly seen. And then I went through all the various images. With Martha, it was a lot harder, but we know that the Gilbert Stuart portrait is probably the best likeness there is. So I simply relied on that one. But then for the others, it was more on photography, lots of photography. And with all that information, I pieced together images I thought were good and representative.
What is the process you go through when starting to work on a painting? How much work goes into the project before you start to paint?
Well, first there's all the research and background and things like that. For a normal portrait, a portrait of someone I need to really represent in almost life size and in 3D, in sculpting too, I need to get to know them. This case, a little different with the very public figures, and I'm using it for a relatively small portrait. But a lot of the work happens first, all that research and gathering of images and sketching. But then what I started with as a kid is what I rely on the most is pencil work. And I paint right on, this is painted on board to make it easier for me. And I draw right on the board with pencil and keep going and going until I like it, which takes a while, but until I like it. Getting the scale right and all those things, and then progress from there.
So how long did you work on this painting? And that's from research through the painting process, and even break it up if you have recollection of it. This long to research and this long to paint.
With actually every project, I have the hardest time with knowing exactly how long things take, because I work in bursts, and I work I work hard, put them away, actually put them in a closet, away in the closet so I don't see them, don't look at them purposefully. And then when I pull them out, I can be supremely critical. And that's, so I try never to keep track of actually how much time I spent on them, because I probably get depressed, but I just prefer not to.
Do political ideas or personal views factor into how you represent someone in a painting? How do you remain objective as an artist?
Oh, I think it's fairly simple in that you want to present the person. So I'm always looking, especially if I'm doing a portrait of an individual or a sculpture of an individual, I need to know what their personality's like, what the little personal hook is that I can relate to, and I go with that. So I'm trying to bring someone to life who looks like someone you want to meet.
And what other paintings or sculptures have you done of First Ladies?
Well, First Lady is the most public one for me, is the official portrait of Barbara Bush that's in the White House. An absolute favorite of mine. The whole process was great. The subject, she was wonderful, very enjoyable, and the end result I really liked. We revived Millie for the painting and put her kind of in the shadows in the corner. All the details they're not grand, but it was just very nicely, subtly done. I love it. So that's in 2 dimensions was that one, and in 3 dimensions I actually had sculpted Nancy Reagan for the Reagan Library in California.
How long have you been working with C-SPAN on history projects? And give me a little bit of that relationship.
I smile because it's been a long time, and I'm a history buff, and they think they figured that out pretty quickly. So that tantalizing me with projects was not hard. But I think it was 1998 with the Tocqueville project. It was the Tocqueville tour, so the TV program that retraced the route of Tocqueville across the country. And that actually started, it was supposed to be a painting, and then evolved into a sculpture. So a small bust of Tocqueville. And what C-SPAN didn't really know is that I had not sculpted since the 3rd grade. So it was, I smile now because it was C-SPAN that kind of pushed me towards sculpture just without them knowing. So that's how it started. And then other projects came along, really fun. The President series, so I got to paint every president. And the only tough part about that was the time frame. So typical TV deadlines with 90 days to do the 40-some men. But I love that kind of challenge. And then I also did the Writers series. So a little looser, less serious, almost cartoony versions of American writers. And if nothing else, that was a great education. So I discovered writers I didn't know and historical figures that I really had to research and have some fun with.
When we look at presidential and First Lady portraits that are obviously such a huge part of what is now pop culture, history, recognizable to people, as you mentioned, as you pick out the images of the ladies behind you. Taking your own portrait of Barbara Bush out of the equation, what are some others that stand out for you as exceptional for one reason or another?
There are a couple. I mean, for the presidents, I think just like many people, the portrait of President Kennedy, where he's looking to the side, it's completely unorthodox, and you feel a little detached from him, but you feel like you're there with him. And he having been killed, it adds to that story. You kind of feel the emotion of his presidency right there. I thought that was very powerful, and I thought daring too, for a portrait. There's a Beyond the Washington, which is a grand historical piece. I think the Roosevelt, so Teddy Roosevelt, and that is mainly the freshness of the painting. So it's by Sargent, and he's turning at this I think it was staircase, null post, but it's that kind of proud, very strong stance. And from my memory, I think there was a struggle on trying to get the composition right, and the artist was having a hard time dealing with the president. And at some point, he was walking down the stairs and ordered him to stop. And that was the moment he found the pose. And that's kind of how it happens with portraits. You live with the person a little bit, try to discover what they're like, and then and try to find the pose that really portrays them properly.
And then specifically with the First Ladies, so some of the standout ones, portraits for them.
The one that I really love as a painting, and I was surprised at the scale, was Nancy Reagan's. And I know there was a lot, I kind of vaguely remember at the time there was a lot of buildup as to what could she possibly be wearing and things like that. But in the end, it was a very sleek red dress, so nothing truly extravagant or anything, but the lighting and the composition was fantastic. So a dark setting, where you see light coming through a doorway, so there's a little bit of almost action in the painting. And then, but when you go and see it, you have to step right up to it. It's an intimate painting. It's small, and I think that is probably the standout for me. It's just, I think because it was just so unexpected.
Is there anything that you want to conclude with, or any thoughts you have about this project, or future project, or First Ladies in general?
The First Ladies obviously play a unique role. I mean, it's hard to put yourself in their shoes and how they would live day to day. And they develop their own themes and projects and personalities, which we get to know as a public. And I think that's an interesting thing to watch. And I certainly, in flipping through and doing a cursory look at the president's wives, as you all and C-SPAN are doing now, it's an interesting perspective on the White House.